think that what your book also presents, right, is the paradox between what the collective needs and what individuals want, right? And that is exactly. What you're laying out right here. However, there was a time, call me crazy, call me traditionally naive, but there was a time when, older generations actually gave a shit what was going to happen to younger generations. That they, in terms of the legacy and impact that they wanted to have, they wanted to leave each generation better than the one that they lived in. Is there like this
crazy, Danielle?
Yeah,
naive.
I know. It's insane, because when you say like, oh, well, the benefits of actually doing the right thing for climate change are so diffuse, and I'm just like, are they? Because we just experienced in New York City, where I am, and Waj is in the DC metro area, we just experienced a different type of lockdown that didn't have to do with a global pandemic. It had to do with the air being so goddamn toxic coming down from the Canada wildfires. And why are the Canada wildfires burning so early and so fast and so, and so out of control? Because they've had the hottest spring that they've ever had on record.
Absolutely.
Right? And the fact that the globe is getting hotter has created this tinderbox effect that has, allowed for these brush fires to kind of run. And now it wasn't just the people in Canada that were affected. It was 100 million people inside of the United States. So when we look at this and we say, we just had to spend 3 days inside wearing masks if you had to go outside because you were going to be breathing in toxic air. This is going to become more of the norm and not just an anomaly. And also, if you have kids or give a shit about kids, then maybe we actually want to make sure that they have clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and clean soil to continue with our agricultural system. Like, is it just that collectively we have just become selfish? Just that, like, the idea of our individual needs and desires just have become so, I don't know, I guess delusioned to the point that, like, it's every person for themselves. We've just become so tribal in that way.
Yeah. So I think we might have become more selfish than we were in the past. I think it's fair to say that the silent generation, the greatest generation, people born in the 1910s, 20s, and 30s probably had more of a civic spirit. And the way they got there was by having the Great Depression and the Second World War. And I think those moments, horrible as they were, had a variety of unifying effects, not least because they made the rich poorer, right? So this is one of the horrible truths about equality, is that the big decreases in inequality that we see historically come when really bad things happen, particularly war, but also famine and plague, right? So the Black Death was really great for the peasants who survived it. I think wars, they have that effect of reducing inequalities among people, and in really unequal countries, it's easy to see that kind of people don't have a sense of shared solidarity anymore. But then there's the sacrifice in war. And so you also saw just huge growth in America's state capacity, firstly, of course, in the New Deal, but then through the, 40s through the 60s. And then it stops, right? It stops basically with the creation of Medicare and Medicaid. And from that point onwards, those kind of collective goals, I think, have been, they've been anathema in American politics. Think how hard it was for Barack Obama to get through a pretty, what I call in the book, a pretty milquetoast, pretty moderate healthcare bill that from European standards looks, kind of crappy. And
it was inspired in part by Republicans, Mitt Romney.
Right, inspired by Mitt Romney, who then has to turn against it for his own party. I mean, who knows what he really thinks about this? You can see with John McCain, right, deciding not to kill it, that clearly some people on the left of the Republican Party, if you can say such a thing, maybe they recognize that. But that got sucked into America's racial politics. I talk in the book about Congressman John Lewis and Emmanuel Cleaver and people being spat at and called racial slurs when they go up to the passing of the bill. So something has clearly gone wrong there. Mm-hmm. But let me rephrase it slightly by saying the 50s and 60s were not a great place for African Americans. This is still the era of Jim Crow. And I talk about this a bit in the book. America's Senate and House are much, much more polarized than they were between 1940, actually between the 30s and the 70s, right? Far more polarized. But the reason is because half of the Democratic Party were Dixiecrats. So, what looks like everybody getting along is just the Democratic Party being split between people who want to keep Jim Crow alive and don't want civil rights. So maybe America has always been split in different ways, right? I'm not sure the era of the 50s and 60s is more equal. There is maybe a greater increase in public spending, but it's also a really racially divided country with horrible gender norms that explodes into violence at the end of the 1960s. So, maybe it's always been bad. Maybe that's a depressing answer too.
Just real quickly, Waj, I just want to say, because that's something that I've really been wrestling with over the last several years has this always, am I just more hip to, because this is my work and, and life, is that, has it always been this bad? Right? Because when you explain that and you say, well, there was this fractious breakdown that was about racism and the economy in the 1950s and 60s. Okay, now fast forward to the 21st century, and guess what? There is a breakdown, and it is between two parties, not within the Democrats and the Republicans, but it is between those two straight parties, where you have one that is wholly believing in fascism and the other one that is trying to hold on to democracy. But there's always been that 30%, I guess is what I want to say, that has never wanted progress, never wanted equity, didn't want women to vote, didn't want Jim Crow to end, that we've been fighting against.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I lived in the States between 2000 and 2013. I was born in Stanford University Hospital.
A U.S. citizen.
I am indeed. I remember very well that there was some number I think it was 27% was this baseline below which George W. Bush's opinion rating, polling approval, could never go. That there were always a group of people who, no matter how bad governance got under the Republican Party in Bush's second term, which was pretty bad, people
really bad.
It's funny how we've kind of recalibrated our views on that. I think Donald Trump is probably a worse human being in terms of his character than George W. Bush. It's not clear to me that if you look at the policy outcomes, that it was actually worse under Donald Trump.
A disastrous war on terror that has ruined countries and generations.
Yeah. I mean, and just look at Hurricane Katrina. I mean, maybe it would have been equally bad under Trump. It's not clear to me, though, that even Trump managed COVID as badly as George W. Bush managed Katrina, right? So, and there were always people supporting that. And, I think that is true in most countries around the world, is that there are political divisions. They fall along, left-right redistributive kind of economic dimension. Sure, they do. But they also fall along a kind of liberal authoritarian dimension that's pretty robust to social change. Let me just say one thing, Danielle, about norms, though. One of the reasons why I think we've spoken a lot more about these issues in the last 5 or 10 years, it's partly police violence, right? It's partly the death of George Floyd. But the death of George Floyd is one in a series of deaths, right, of African Americans at the hands of the police. I mean, we could go back to the 90s and the LA riots and so on, right? This is nothing new, but norms have changed. So that you can't say that and you can't do that, norms we talked about earlier, those have changed in terms of gender norms, just enormously in terms of sexuality, right? I mean, the America I moved back to in 2000 was an America that was about to ban gay marriage in almost every single state, often constitutionally. That's changed dramatically. And I think norms about racism on the whole have improved. I mean, it's pretty tenuous there, but, I think there has been improvement. So you can certainly see it in the United Kingdom, right? The Conservative Party may have had a struggling period of government over the last few years. The one, I think, positive thing you can say is that we've had several finance ministers in a row who are ethnic minorities, and now an ethnic minority prime minister. So things have changed, and sometimes we forget those because we're really polarized about these issues. But if you think about like the average of the norm, actually, I think that's improved quite a bit.